Business license hearing to conduct the decision of the Chief License Inspector to suspend the business license issued to 1394867 BC Limited for business premises located at 247 West Broadway. Before I begin, I have some opening remarks. This hearing is being convened by electronic means as authorized under Part 14 of the Procedure Bylaw, and as such, panel members may participate in person or by electronic means. Seeing as we're all in person, I can skip this part. We acknowledge that we are on the unceded territory and homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. We thank them for having cared for this land and look forward to working together with them in partnership as we continue to build this great city together. In the case of an emergency where we need to evacuate the building, I would like to direct your attention to the exits. There are 2 exits beyond the glass doors and to the left. If these exits are obstructed, please direct your attention to the 4 exits inside these chambers. Please use the stairs, do not use the elevator, and I'd also like to highlight that there is a defibrillator located at the end of the hallway outside of the council chamber. Clerk, may we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Councillor Fry in the chair, Councillor Carr, Councillor Klassen. You have quorum, Chair Fry.
Thanks, Clerk. We'll now start with opening remarks from Robert LeBlanc, Council for the City of Vancouver. One sec. Oh, there we go.
Here we go. Thank you. Good morning to members of the Business License Hearing Panel. My name is Robert LeBlanc. I'm Litigation Counsel with the City's Legal Services Department. Just before I make further introductory comments, I note that the licensee 1394867 BC Limited is represented this morning by counsel. I'll give him an opportunity to introduce himself as well as anybody here attending on behalf of the licensee. You want to introduce yourself?
Procedurally, should I stand when I speak, or is it better if I sit? Either or?
Standing seems fine to me.
Okay. So my name is, for the record, Lloyd, L-L-O-Y-D, first initial J for Jack. I'm counsel to the applicant. And here with me today is a spokesperson for the applicant, Dana Larson, and the applicant himself, Mr. Mueller, who's the director of the Numbered Corporation.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. The hearing before the panel today is an appeal by the licensee of the Chief License Inspector's decision to suspend the business license issued to the company on January 31st, 2023. That business license authorized the company to operate as a retail dealer of gifts and novelties at the premises located at 247 West Broadway in the City of Vancouver. A copy of that business license is contained in the evidence book materials at tab 2 and page 4 in the upper right-hand corner. The suspension by the Chief License Inspector and the basis, therefore, is set out in the letter of May 11th, 2023. That is also contained in the evidence book at tab 12. And I am going to read from a portion of that letter, being the first few paragraphs. This is page 22 in the upper right-hand corner of the materials. On March 2nd, 2023, a City Property Use Inspector conducted an inspection of your premises located at 247 West Broadway. The inspector's report confirms that controlled substances as defined in the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act are being sold from the location. The inspector's report is attached. And as a side note, that report is also contained in the materials at tab 7. After reviewing the Property Use Inspector's report, I have concluded that you have been operating your business 1394867 BC Ltd, located at 247 West Broadway, with a total disregard for the laws that govern the products you have been retailing. Further, you were dishonest in your application for a retail business license by not disclosing the true nature of your business. Pursuant to Section 4, Sub 12 of the License Bylaw, every license holder must comply with all federal and provincial laws. Based on the Property Use Inspector's report, I have concluded that your business is guilty of gross misconduct. Therefore, in accordance with Section 277 Sub C of the Vancouver Charter, your business license number 23-181366 is suspended effective immediately through until December 31st, 2023. The reason for the suspension are clearly set out in that letter. It involved the sale of illegal controlled substances by the licensee, non-compliance with federal laws, and dishonest representations in the business license application that we'll get to. In the Chief License Inspector's view, all of that amounted to gross misconduct. The city's witness today at the hearing is the Chief License Inspector, Sarah Hicks, who will take the panel through the materials in the evidence book and explain how she arrived at the decision to suspend the business license. What the panel can expect to hear is that an investigation into the business activities of the premises revealed non-compliance with respect to the terms of the business license and non-compliance with respect to the license bylaw in regard to the sale of controlled substances. The Chief License Inspector's position is that her conclusion that the licensee was guilty of gross misconduct was a reasonable one, that the suspension of the business license logically flowed and legally flowed from that determination, and that her decision to suspend should be upheld by this panel on the appeal. Of course, the licensee has the opportunity today to persuade this panel otherwise. Before embarking on the evidence, there are some legal and procedural matters to note. The Chief License Inspector's power to suspend the business license is set out in Section 277 of the Vancouver Charter. 277 of the Vancouver Charter is reproduced in the materials at tab 14 at page 26, and it reads, the Chief License Inspector shall have power at any time summarily to suspend for such period as he or she may determine any license if the holder of the license, and subsection C is operative, has, in the opinion of the inspector, been guilty of such gross misconduct in or with respect to the licensed premises as to warrant the suspension of the license. This council's powers to review a business license suspension is further set out in that section. That's also at the bottom of page 26 under tab 14. Any person whose license has been suspended under this section may appeal to the council in accordance with the procedure for that purpose prescribed by bylaw, and upon such appeal, the council may confirm or set aside any such suspension on such terms as it may see fit. And this panel's powers to review the business license are further set out in Section 275 of the Charter. That states the granting or refusing of a license to an applicant, therefore, and the revocation or suspension of a license which has been granted shall be deemed to be in the discretion of council, and the council may grant, refuse, revoke, or suspend the license without stating any reasons, therefore, save in respect of a licensee who by reasonable efforts cannot be found. Council shall not revoke a license without giving the holder thereof an opportunity to be heard. And again, that opportunity to be heard is the purpose of today's hearing. Under that section, you have broad powers to revoke, suspend, uphold a business license. This is an administrative proceeding. The rules of natural justice apply. That includes the fact that the license holder is entitled to hear the allegations against them. They may respond to those allegations. They may ask questions of the witnesses, and they may make submissions on their own behalf. If this panel sees fit to uphold the suspension, overturn it with the stipulation of additional conditions on the license, you should provide a basis for doing so. And finally, I'm just going to note what the purpose of the hearing today is that it's an appeal from the Chief License Inspector's decision to suspend the license. The purpose of the hearing is not to advance advocacy with respect to any safe supply or sale of psychedelic drug substances. And under the circumstances, this panel can in no way authorize the sale of such products in contravention of federal legislation, provincial legislation, in terms of granting a license authorizing the sale of those products. So those are my introductory comments. The city does have one witness here today. If the panel is ready, we can move on to the testimony of Ms. Sarah Hicks.
Great. Thanks, Mr. LeBlanc. We will now hear the testimony by the City of Vancouver, Sarah Hicks, Chief License Inspector.
If you could introduce yourself, please.
Good morning. Sarah Hicks, Chief License Inspector.
Thank you. Ms. Hicks, I understand that you were the Chief License Inspector for the entirety of 2023. Is that right?
I was.
And you were the party who decided to make the suspension of the business license that's set out in the letter of May 11th, 2023, respecting the business located at 247 West Broadway.
That is correct.
And in terms of your involvement in this file, I understand you produced a series of notes setting out a chronology in terms of the investigation and the action that you decided to take.
I did.
And those notes are contained in the evidence materials at tab 11.
They are.
Okay, I'm just going to ask the panel to refer to tab 11. That's at page 20 in the upper right-hand corner. And Ms. Hicks, I'm going to suggest that we use your notes as a template for setting out your evidence today.
Okay.
Now, I see that you've made a notation at the top of your notes with respect to the business at 247 West Broadway. How is it that this particular business came to your attention in early 2023?
This business came to my attention as a result of an investigation from our property use inspectors. They investigated based off social media information from Mr. Dana Larson on February 13th, advising that 247 West Broadway was open and that they were retailing items such as mushrooms, LSD, DMT, coca leaf, peyote, kratom. The property use inspector provided me with a report, and from there I began my research and my attempts to speak with the applicant.
Wait for the chair for a minute. Thank you. Let's deal with some of those preliminary notes that you made then with respect to the business license application submitted January 5th, 2023. That business license application is located in the materials under tab 3 at page 5. And can you just tell the panel what the application entailed?
Certainly. The application was submitted through our online portal, and it was described as a gift shop and party supplies by the corporation 1394867 BC Limited, which had a sole director of Valentin Mueller.
And some supporting materials for that application came in the form of BC company summary indicating the directors of the company. Is that right?
Correct.
And a copy of a BC company summary for the business 1394867 BC Ltd is also contained in the materials under tab 8. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
And I see from that BC company summary that the sole director with respect to the company is a Mr. Valentin Mueller. That would be the same applicant from the business license general application under tab 3.
Yes.
Now, your next note in the materials under tab 11 indicates an inspection report, CF 20230014008. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, the property use inspector conducted a investigation at the site and found that they were retailing the substances described, including things like mushrooms, coca, kratom, and peyote, and presented that to me in order to consider the license.
And a copy of that inspection report, as I mentioned earlier, is in the materials under tab 7. Is that right?
It is, yes.
All right. I see that there are some notations in the report made by the inspector indicating that the sale of illicit substances, and I'm just reading from page 14, the second under the tab, selling illicit substances, including but not limited to psychedelic mushrooms, peyote, LSD, DMT, kratom, coca leaf, and there are some photographs of, is it fair to say, a menu board at the retail location?
Yes.
And it looks like what's being offered for sale are those same things noted by the property use inspector. Some of those items, such as LSD, DMT, coca leaf, is your understanding that those are controlled substances under the Federal Controlled Substances Act.
I understand them to be, yes.
And federal prohibitions don't permit the possession or sale of those materials. Is that right?
That is what I understand.
All right. So following that, I'm going back to your notes at tab 11. Some web research was undertaken.
Chair, if I could just ask council to always cite the page, because I don't have a tab booklet, I just have page numbers. Thank you.
That's an excellent point. Yes, we're just looking, some of us online on a PDF, so.
Okay, thank you. The page number is in the upper right-hand corner, page 20. These are Ms. Hicks's notes, and we're moving on to web research. Can you tell us what was uncovered as a result of the web research?
Yes, I conducted web research on the location and found a number of items that linked the information provided by the inspector. First was the tweet or expression from Dana Larson on February 13th, which discussed the opening of the new business at 247 West Broadway. A mushroomdispensary.com website, which included information about products sold, including psilocybin mushrooms, LSD, and DMT, the addresses of the two locations at the time that they operated, discussing mail services as well, how to become a member, products carried, user guides and warnings, and contact pages. I also found a BC CTV article which pointed to Mr. Dana Larson discussing that they had a retail business license and that at the opening that they were not upfront about the products that they were going to be selling. That article further went on to talk about an East Hastings location and the West Broadway location.
Okay, let's just turn to some of those materials then that you've referred to. Let's start with page 8. That's under tab 5 for anybody who's using tabs. And I understand this is the Twitter post from Dana Larson on February 13th, 2023.
It is.
And this would be showing the front door of 247 West Broadway.
It does.
Mr. Larson's in front of it with the advertisement for the sale of mushrooms, LSD, DMT, coca leaf, peyote, Kratcom, as well as the hours of the premises.
It is.
Okay, and following that, you referred to some web research at the company's web page. That is also in the materials under tab 10 at page 19.
Yes, this is the website for mushroomdispensary.com, which shows the address as well as the products that they are retailing.
They're operating under the name Medicinal Mushroom Dispensary. I see here the address for 247 West Broadway with the hours, as well as an indication the purchases could be made at the storefronts or by mail order for items including coca leaf, Kratcom, LSD, DMT, peyote, and more. And then following that, you indicated reading a BCC TV article from March 2nd, 2023. That's also in the materials at tab 6, page 9. Is that right?
Yes.
And I'm going to turn to page 11, which is the third page of the article, and I note that the article specifically references, starting at the third full paragraph, regarding a question from Liberal MLA Eleanor Sturco, blaming the NDP government for allowing a brick-and-mortar illicit drugstore to operate in Vancouver, a reference to the Medicinal Mushroom Dispensary, a store run by Dana Larson that recently expanded. Larson's store at the Coca Leaf Cafe on East Hastings Street has been operating for 2 years. He opened a second location on West Broadway 2 weeks ago. Your understanding is that this article is specifically referencing the 247 West Broadway location.
Yes.
With a quote from Mr. Larson indicating, we have a retail business license, says Larson. To be honest, we didn't tell the licensing officials that we'd be selling psychedelics and mushrooms when we opened up. Now, I take it from that failure to inform licensing officials, including a misrepresentation on the business license application submitted by Mr. Mueller, respecting the fact that the business would be operating to be involved in the sale of gifts and party supplies. Is that right?
Can you repeat your question?
Yep. That indication from Mr. Larson that he didn't tell licensing officials that we'd be selling psychedelics and mushrooms when we opened up is reflective of the fact that those items are omitted from the business license application by Mr. Mueller, indicating that they would be selling gifts and party supplies.
I believe it can be reflective of the application in front of us today. It may also be reflective of the Coca Leaf Cafe location that he also discusses in that article.
Okay, thank you. What efforts did you make in terms of furthering the investigation into the business activities at 247 West Broadway after the web research?
I attempted contact with the applicant, Mr. Mueller. I attempted contact and left a voicemail on April 6th. I didn't hear back, so I contacted again on April 13th, where I was able to connect with the applicant. I did ask him whether or not, or I advised that I had received a report from the property use inspectors, and I asked whether I could confirm that his site was selling these products, in which he said he could not answer the question and that his lawyer would need to. I advised that I wasn't a member of VPD. I wasn't seeking, legal recourse on that or charges under that, but that I was calling in relation to the business license and that if those products were being sold, I needed to make a decision on the license, such as whether or not to suspend or recommend to council for revocation. Mr. Mueller said he understood my question, but that he would not answer them. I asked whether or not he was still operating a business at the location or if another business had taken over instead. He again refused to answer. I asked who would be able to answer. He said it would likely be his lawyer and that he would pass on my contact information to have them reach out to me. When I didn't hear back from the location, I called again a week later and left a voicemail advising that since I had not heard, I would be making a decision based off the information that I had at hand.
And the decision that you made was the decision of May 11th to suspend the business license.
Correct.
I'm just going to turn back to that letter at page 22 of the evidence book. The last paragraph on the first page of that letter indicates a direction from you to the company, to the licensee, that they must immediately cease operating the business at 247 West Broadway, and it must remain closed during the suspension period. Do you have any information for the panel regarding the operation of the business after the issuance of the suspension in May 11, 2023?
The business continued to operate after the letter of suspension.
In terms of enforcement by police or any other authority, was any enforcement that you're aware of undertaken at the premises?
I'm aware that in November of 2023, a search warrant was conducted at this site in which controlled substances were seized.
Okay. And that was based on advice provided to you by VPD Sergeant Scott Rollins on December 21st, 2023. Is that right?
It was, yes.
And a copy of that information from Sergeant Rollins by way of email is contained in the evidence materials at page 24.
Yes.
And I see there confirmation that that 3 businesses were subject to search warrants Those businesses were openly advertising and selling psilocybin. I understand that's the active hallucinogen or a psychedelic material in magic mushrooms. Is that right?
Yes.
Coca leaf, DMT, and LSD. One of those three businesses is identified as Medicinal Mushroom Dispensary at 247 West Broadway. And at the bottom of the email, an indication that what was seized from the business premises at that time included 27 kilograms of psilocybin, 2.2 kilograms of coca leaf, 2.7 kilograms of LSD, and 1 kilogram of DMT. I also note that the sergeant indicated that those materials were all substances under the Prohibited Substances or the Controlled Drug and Substances Act, and you've already indicated that's your understanding as well.
Yes.
All right. In terms of the 2024 business license for the licensee at the premises, what's the status of that?
The applicant has submitted a new application at the beginning of this year and saw staff yesterday who understood that it was part of this proceeding today. So that application is on hold pending the outcome of today's decision. That application, the description of the business includes retail sale of items, including books, posters, arts, gifts, plants, and entheogens.
Entheogens, that may be a new word for some of us here. Can you tell us what that means?
I understand that entheogens are psychedelic substances and include such things as psilocybin mushrooms.
Just getting back then to the basis of your suspension for May 11, 2023. What I'm hearing and seeing in the letter then is that the basis of the suspension was the fact that the business was holding out for sale prohibited controlled substances in the form of LSD and psilocybin and DMT and whatnot. Is that right?
Correct.
Also, misrepresentation on the business license application, purposefully omitting those items that they're selling.
Correct.
And that the conclusion that you draw from non-compliance with respect to that federal legislation and to the dishonesty in the business license application amounts to gross misconduct.
Yes.
And that is a basis for which you are authorized to suspend the business license under Section 277 of the Vancouver Charter.
It is.
And that's what you did.
Yes.
Thank you. Those are my questions for Ms. Hicks.
Thank you. Panel members, do we have any questions for the witness? A reminder, this is the only opportunity to ask questions from the City of Vancouver witness. Councillor Carr?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hess. I'm wondering if you could let us know if there were any police inspections or arrests or involvement of the VPD in this operation.
I can only speak to the email that was received from Officer Rowlands, where he is advised that in November 2023, that a search warrant was conducted and substances under the Controlled Substances Acts were seized.
Okay, no arrests, but substances.
I can't speak whether there were arrests.
Okay, that's my question. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Klassen.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for sort of walking us through the timelines on this. And I did sort of note some of the recommendation from our city legal team here is to the caution around getting involved in any sort of advocacy around. This is a sort of simple case of a case of the business license holder not upholding the terms of that business license and and not being sort of forthcoming when it comes to the actual nature of the business. Is this sort of, are those usually the grounds that we would be using for a suspension and a decision against an appeal?
Are you directing that question to council or Ms. Hicks? I think Ms. Hicks is probably
This is the
well suited
witness
to
question.
answer.
Yeah, that's fine to staff. So, Sarah.
Can you repeat your question for me?
Essentially, if we, this is sort of a simple case of not us sort of driving into a lane of around advocacy, but a case of the business license holder not only not upholding the terms of the business license, but also not being forthcoming about the actual activities of the business. Is that correct?
Yes, my understanding is the decision in front of you today is to uphold or not, or alter my decision to suspend the license. It is not to amend bylaws or other types of advocacy opportunities.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to be exactly clear about that direction. Thanks very much.
I've added myself to the queue with some questions. Thanks for joining us today. Do you know if the shop or the proprietors have been convicted of a crime under federal or provincial law with regard to this operation?
As a result of the VPD operation,
Yeah, just in general with this mushroom dispensary.
I'm not aware of any specific convictions to the applicant at this time.
Okay, just framing it within the context of for Section 12 with the ability to include that. Now, was the to what extent and were the details of warnings regarding this business license? Is it just the documented material with the conversations with Mr. Mueller? Have there been repeated warnings?
No, it is the material in this package. It was very shortly after the setup of the business that we became aware of the true nature of the business in which started this process.
Okay, so I appreciate that the grounds for this revocation of the license is misrepresentation on the application. Is that?
It is more than that. It is both a misrepresentation and it is that they are not operating in accordance with federal and provincial law in that they are retailing controlled substances which cannot be sold at a retail storefront.
Although technically they have not been convicted under federal or provincial law.
Not that I am aware of.
Okay. So on the notion of misrepresentation on the license, how do licenses represent what they sell? I'm looking through the license bylaw 4450.
Mhm.
There isn't a category there isn't a definition of gifts or party supplies. Is there an expectation that licensees should find a definition within the business license?
No, licensees are provided with a section in the application process to provide a description of their business. From that description, staff then determine the appropriate category for the license.
So would staff typically seek more clarification? I mean, party supplies is somewhat ambiguous, I would suggest.
If there's anything that is unclear, such as the new term on the new application submitted, entheogens, they would seek additional information from that. But party supplies isn't something that staff would typically consider to be illegal controlled substances.
Was there clarification sought for what was being?
No.
Okay. Would there be a better category that they might have applied under, in your opinion?
Because the products that they're retailing are controlled substances, which aren't able to be retailed at storefront, there is no category that is suitable.
Okay. And anecdotally, I've seen a lot of mushroom dispensaries sprouting like mushrooms throughout the city of Vancouver. Do we know how many mushroom dispensaries exist in the city of Vancouver right now and what they're licensing under?
I don't have the details on numbers, no, but when we become aware of them, we do begin investigations and enforcement. That enforcement can include letters, orders, tickets, and referrals to prosecution.
So have there been specific mushroom dispensaries that are also targeted for license enforcement?
Yes, everyone that we are aware of goes through license enforcement processes.
Okay. And what was the impetus for this particular license review? Was it the provincial government, MLA Sturco's comments? Was it complaints from the community, or was it just the general sort of process of license review that we do?
I understand that it came about as a result of the social media that is part of this package, advertising that 247 had been up and operating, and that they were selling those products, which started our investigation.
So our inspectors saw the social media post and responded?
It was brought forward through the city manager to my attention, in which I asked the inspectors to go begin the investigation.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. Councillor Carr.
Thanks. I do have a few other questions. Could you remind me what you said the applicant has, or the license holder has submitted a new application for a license? What was the new wording on the new license?
It is, the description of the business includes retail sales of items, including books, posters, art, gifts, plants, and entheogens.
Okay. The books, art, entheogens, got it. All right. Can you tell me, when the City of Vancouver decided to provide licenses to cannabis retailers, I was on council at the time. I remember the license fee was extremely high. Was it $30,000, or can you just clarify that for me?
I believe so.
Yeah, 30,000. And can you tell me what the wording was on the license that was issued to cannabis retailers?
No, I apologize. I don't have that information with me today.
Okay. Okay. Is it possible to get that information?
It would be in our licensing systems. We would have to go back and look for that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Inspector Hicks. Thank you, Councillor Carr. Oh, sorry. Does the licensee council have any questions for the witness?
Certainly, yes. Very much appreciated. And Councillor Carr, I'm happy to provide you with the language used for the medical marijuana-related use bylaw. If you'd like that, I can forward that to the chain email for the hearing. I can just advise anecdotally, I was counsel on what was called the test case regarding that licensing system. It had authorized effectively medical cannabis information centers. And so that there was some back and forth regarding that, whether it was a little bit disingenuous because they were clearly providing medical cannabis to patients. But ultimately, I actually argued that it was a violation of federal law and lost at the BC Court of Appeal. So these information centers were perfectly lawful, and I could see where your thinking was going, so I'm with you on that. Ms. Hicks, thank you so much. I got some questions for you. Do you have any sense of how many of these psilocybin shops are in the city of Vancouver?
No, I don't have that information available.
I'm going to suggest to you that there's a lot of them. Agree?
I apologize. I can't speculate.
You indicated to my friend that in 2023, you were the chief license inspector for the city of Vancouver, correct?
Correct.
How long were you the chief license inspector before 2023?
I've been the chief license inspector since 2021.
Okay. What type of training did you have to get to that position?
I had been the Deputy Chief License Inspector for 7 or 8 years. I have been the license office manager for that long, and I have participated in a number of meetings and opportunities to understand the authority that I have under that role with legal counsel.
Do you have any legal training?
No.
Have you ever made a finding of gross misconduct before?
Yes.
Could you describe a typical circumstance in which you make a finding of gross misconduct under Section 277?
I don't believe that there's a typical circumstance. It would depend on the nature of the file. Every file is unique, and I consider the facts that are provided to me.
Are you aware of any finding of gross misconduct in relation to medical cannabis shops that were violating the bylaw by selling cannabis?
Not that I'm aware of.
Do you have any training on how to identify controlled substances?
No.
Did you attend personally at 247 West Broadway to inspect the premises?
I did not.
Do you know what psilocybin is?
I understand that it is the active component in mushrooms, which is a controlled substance under Class 3 of the Controlled Substances Act.
Did you receive any certificates regarding what the drugs seized from 247 West Broadway were?
I did not.
Have you made a finding of gross misconduct regarding any other psilocybin shops in the City of Vancouver?
I don't have that information available with me today.
Could you get that if you had to find it?
I believe I could.
Would it be contained in the Amanda system that's contained in the evidence book?
No, Amanda is our licensing system.
I'm going to ask you a couple more questions about that, but just while I'm dealing with that, do you have sole discretion to make a finding of gross misconduct as the chief license inspector?
Yes.
As the chief license inspector, when you're looking at a license, if someone made a submission regarding what their license was for, and then they amended it, does that factor into your assessment of gross misconduct?
When they amended what?
So somebody says, I'm going to open a flower shop, and you go to them and say, look, you're selling something other than flowers. We have an issue with that. They reapply for the license, and they say, okay, we're selling these specific flowers. Does that improvement in the clarity of their license application factor into your assessment of whether or not there has been gross misconduct?
I think it depends on the totality of information that is before me of whether or not that would improve or amend my decision on gross misconduct.
Could you give me a sense of how many findings of gross misconduct you've made over your career?
No, I cannot.
More than 10?
I can't speculate.
Have you ever come to council to make submissions regarding a finding of gross misconduct before?
Yes.
When's the last time you came here to do it?
I don't have that information available.
Okay. Did you do the internet research for the evidence booklet that's before us today?
Yes, I did.
Over the course of that research, you appear to have found a number of articles dealing with controlled substances. Is that fair?
Yes.
For example, on page 11, council, for me, it says number 9 in the top right corner, and CTV News Vancouver. But it's actually, as far as the 30-page evidence booklet, it's page 11. I don't know which tab it is, sorry.
Tab 6.
Tab 6. It says company's cocaine approval claim fuels Vancouver dispensary outraged. You see that?
So you're on page 11 with that quote?
Page 11, correct. You agree that's part of the evidence package?
I agree that the BCCTV, yes, which is titled Company's Cocaine Approval Fuels Vancouver Dispensary Outrage.
Okay. And you did that research, correct?
Yes.
Over the course of your research, did you become aware that there's been a decriminalization of simple possession of drugs in British Columbia?
It wasn't through this research that I was aware of that. I was aware of that prior to.
Over the course of this research, or just generally, are you aware that there's an opiate addiction crisis in the city of Vancouver?
Yes.
When you read this company's cocaine approval claim article, what did you understand from it?
The information that pertains to the file is the conversation from Mr. Larson on the medical mushroom dispensary and talking about the East Hastings location and the West Broadway location.
Okay. Are you aware of the legislative amendment that made this cocaine approval possible?
No.
Are you aware of the special access program from the federal government?
I am aware of special access as it relates to psilocybin, like for some locations to prescribe it.
Are you aware of the 3 methods that a person can access psilocybin?
No.
Are you aware of Section 56 of the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act?
Not specifically.
So I'm going to suggest to you that the cocaine approval was a similar Section 56 exemption that allowed this company to have cocaine legally. Agree or disagree?
I won't speculate. I don't have the information in front of me.
You spoke with law enforcement about this shop, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you speak with law enforcement about whether it was possible for someone to lawfully possess psilocybin?
No. I spoke to the VPD about the search warrant that was conducted.
If someone had an exemption that allowed them to possess psilocybin, do you agree that they'd legally be allowed to have it?
If they were following the context of the law. I don't understand that law to allow retail sale.
What do you know about the special access program?
The special, I don't know. I don't know anything about the special access program to be able to speak to it.
At the City of Vancouver, how does the licensing office work?
In what capacity?
Say I want to have a business license. As I understand it, there's 3 branches. There's the property use inspector, who we deal with in your evidence package, correct?
Mhm.
Who conducts inspections, checks to see if you're complying with your license. Is that fair?
Yes, that is what part of their role.
Then there's an administrative office that administers the licenses. Is that correct?
That reviews applications? Yes.
And then there's an information office where if somebody's applying for a license, they interact with that office to figure out what license to apply for.
That is one and the same.
Okay, all right, so there's 2 branches, inspection and information administration. Is that fair?
There's a lot of different branches. The license office is one component of the department, development, buildings, and licensing. All of those groups include permitting, building permits, development permits, which are based off land use and building code items. Property use is a division within DBL, which conducts inspections across 17 different bylaws for the city. One of those being, licensing and zoning.
What type of business can go in 247 West Broadway, Vancouver, BC?
I don't have that information available to me today.
Is it fair to say that if it received a retail dealer license, it could have a retail dealer license there, right?
Presumably, yes.
Is it possible that the applicant called the information office, described their business, and was advised, sounds like gifts novelties?
If they had discussed the fact that they were selling controlled substances, I do not believe that staff would have provided that advice.
If they said entheogens, is it possible staff said, sounds like gifts novelties?
It is possible that staff would not have understood that term.
What is staff directed to do if someone says they're going to sell something illegal?
They're advised to let the applicant know that they cannot process the license, and then it gets put on a hold, and additional processes are added, such as the chief license inspector review to determine next steps.
As the chief license inspector, how many times have you done a review like that?
I don't have that information available to me.
Have you ever?
Yes,
Have?
yes.
If the finding today on this appeal, sorry, actually, no, I'm not going to. Brief indulgence, sorry. What is the process for the license office if someone applies for a license or a license category that doesn't exist?
They would consult with a supervisor or a manager to determine next steps, or depending on if they believe the activity to be illegal, by placing it on a hold with the chief license inspector process added for my review.
If terms were applied to this license, what terms would you like to see?
I wouldn't speculate on that. I believe those terms are at the discretion of council.
If council designated an entheogen license or a CDSA Schedule 3 license for retail dealer, similar to the medical marijuana related use licenses, would the license office take a position on that, or would you simply enforce if council took that position?
I would have to discuss with our legal team.
Did you have discussions about these psilocybin shops with your legal team?
I have discussed psilocybin with our legal team. All cases that come before me for decision, I have discussions with our legal team to ensure that they're aware and that advising them of my decision in the matter.
Were you in the licensing office in 2015 when the medical marijuana-related use licenses were introduced?
Yes, I was the license office manager at the time.
And this is my final question. Do you remember that process? Could you shed some light on that for us?
Broadly, those the licenses for medical marijuana related use were generally for the advocacy of the product, not that it controlled the product. I do not have the details of all that was required of those licensees at the time.
Those are my questions. Thank you very much for your time.
Great, thank you, and thank you, Chief Inspector Hicks. We're now going to move on to the opening remarks from the licensee and the licensee's counsel. And you're welcome to stand at the podium if you prefer.
Thank you. So I will be relatively brief. I think that there's three main points here. First, it may be premature to pull the license. There's been no finding regarding the activities at the premises. And there's a valid bylaw court process in order to make a determination of compliance with the licensing bylaw. So my initial submission is that the license should be instated until there's a finding in court, in the bylaw court. The second is somewhat philosophical, and Ms. Hicks very kindly, she has a great deal of experience with this licensing office. It is entirely possible that my client applied for this license and was forthright with I'm assuming somebody on a telephone, and was told, yeah, you are gifts retail as a retail dealer. So there is philosophically technical compliance with that component of the license. The fact that a new application has been done in which the substances are explicitly mentioned in my submission is a fairly strong countervailing piece of evidence against the suggestion that there's gross misconduct under Section 277. I'll note that some of the evidence package lacks specificity regarding this particular license. And Ms. Hicks was very candid about that, in that she said there is another premises that she called the Coca Leaf Cafe, which is a limited food service establishment premises, whose license has been renewed and continues to exist, but it is effectively the same business. She references that. And so in the evidence package, any suggestion I submit towards gross misconduct doesn't land on 247 West Broadway. And the new license application supports that. Ms. Hicks very kindly gave us a little bit of a guide to psilocybin shops in the city. effectively, what has happened from a broader perspective is in 2020 and 2021, the federal government granted a significant number of Section 56 Controlled Drugs and Substances Act exemptions for individuals dealing with treatment-resistant depression, certain opiate addiction disorders, and a variety of other ailments. Individuals that held those exemptions had no lawful means to access the substance. And the origin of these shops was providing it to people that had lawful authority to possess it. And I raise this just because Ms. Carr asked, what about the medical marijuana-related use bylaw? And it does look relatively similar, in which with medical cannabis, there was lawful authority to access it for certain chronically ill individuals and no legal mechanism for them to get it. Ms. Hicks mentioned the special access program. I raise this just to point out less than 10 individuals in Canada have been granted permission to access psilocybin through that program. So there's a serious lack of access, similar to the cannabis issue. Finally, on this appeal, Council, you do have the ability to reinstate the license with terms. I would suggest that this is remarkably similar to the medical marijuana-related use situation. And I would submit that you are entitled to put a term on the license that that they are to operate only as an information center for entheogens, or even that they are only to facilitate access for those holding valid exemptions. There are a variety of tools available to you set out in Section 277. I would submit that you do have jurisdiction to do so. There are a lot of these shops. They are opening in response to the opiate crisis. There's very good research coming from UBC regarding the fact that psilocybin helps people dealing with these addiction issues. And the city has an opportunity here to manage a very difficult situation. And I would say that setting rules for the shops makes good sense in the context. Barring any questions, those are my submissions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Panel members, do you have any questions for the witness? A reminder, this is going to be the only opportunity to ask questions from the licensee license council's witnesses. Councilor Carr.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess you can sit there. That's fine.
My apologies. My apologies. Actually, I missed a section here. This is an opportunity for the licensee's council to call its witnesses if you have any.
I was hoping.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, my bad. I missed that spot.
I got nervous that I was the witness. I said, I'm going to call Dana Larson, who I'll have stand up.
Thank you. I'm acting as the spokesperson for Valentin Mueller and for the corporation. I'd just like to say that I've been involved in this for a long time, and this to me is very reminiscent of what was happening in around 2015 when previous councils decided to allow and create a licensing program for medicinal cannabis dispensaries. There are many other, I don't speak for other mushroom dispensaries operating in the city, but there are definitely many others. I would estimate around 20 or so that I'm aware of, and a growing number. More have been opening on a regular basis. And if the city chooses to license and regulate and simply add the term Schedule 3 substances or mushrooms to the bylaws around cannabis dispensaries, that would, to me, seem a very workable solution to this. There was no charges laid during that raid at all from the police, and I don't expect there is going to be any. And I think that also shows that there's confusion and questions around the legality of these things. Like has been mentioned, there are Canadians that have legal access to these substances, and that number is also a small but growing number of Canadians, very similar to how a small but growing number of Canadians had legal access to medicinal cannabis, a number that ultimately became a very large number of Canadians, many thousands who had legal access, tens of thousands to cannabis to be able to grow it or access it themselves. And the cannabis dispensaries were filling that legal gap. And so this situation is very similar. I see a very easy solution here, which is to add Schedule III substances to the medicinal cannabis bylaws that were written in 2015. Our goal was never to try to trick anybody or try to deceive anybody. We tried to find the category that our license would work in, just to do the things that we wanted to do and apply for that. And we became aware they needed to resubmit it. We resubmitted it in that way. And this is a growing movement. And if the council here today decides to remove that license, I think it's going to present years of challenges with many other mushroom shops that are in this city. If there's an opportunity to be licensed and regulated, I assure you that our dispensary, and I think many others, would be more than happy to comply with those bylaws that are in place. Our goal is not to go against bylaws or to try to challenge the city in that way. Our goal is to seek reasonable regulation and bylaws around these kind of activities, and we would comply if those bylaws were put in place. And I'll also mention that part of our medicinal mushroom dispensary program is to fund something called Get Your Drugs Tested. It's the world's busiest free street drug analysis center. We have a location right next to our dispensary there at 245 West Broadway, which opened in December. And that is entirely funded through the revenues. That location is funded through the revenues of the mushroom dispensary next door. And when the medicinal cannabis bylaws were created, there was a category for a compassion club. And part of that compassion club regulation was that you had to be providing a kind of a health service along with your operation. And so we complied with that already by operating the Get Your Drugs Tested program. And I would submit that if we are forced to close in some way, it's not going to change the reality of mushroom dispensaries in the city, but it will cause a lot of harm to those that rely on our services, people who are seeking to use psychedelics and these kind of substances for ailments like PTSD, depression, and drug addiction and drug challenging issues as well. I believe that we are a benefit to our community, both through our dispensary itself and through our Get Your Drugs Tested program. We do everything we can to provide these substances in a safe and responsible manner. We have adults-only rules that we enforce very strictly. Everyone who wishes to purchase from us needs to sign a form indicating they're going to be a responsible user and not let these products fall in the hands of children or pets, and they're not going to do irresponsible things while doing that. So voluntarily, we already make every effort to be as responsible as we can regarding this kind of retail. And if City Council chose to put in other regulations to ensure that responsibility and that kind of action, we would, of course, happily comply with those regulations and bylaws. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further witnesses from the Licensees Council?
We did have another one, but unfortunately he had a family emergency. So that's it. Thank you, Council.
Sure thing. So now we go on to panel members. Do you have any questions for the witnesses? A reminder, this is the only opportunity to ask questions from the licensee, Licenses Council's witnesses. Councillor Carr.
Yes, thank you. And it doesn't matter to me if it's the council or the witness that answers this, or maybe both. But my first question is basically what would happen if the shops that do provide psychotropic, psychedelic drugs, including the ones that have been listed here, such as mushrooms and various things. What would happen if they couldn't access the drugs that are at least reviewed for safety? I mean, is there a street market in this stuff? What happens on the street? I'm unclear. I don't know.
So you're asking about how we review substances for safety in our
Just
location?
saying, if people weren't allowed to come into a shop like the one that's licenses under review right now, and people had to turn to the street, how is it, like, do gangs, like, we know that obviously there's a poison drug crisis in this city, but are there people on the street, gangs, selling these kinds of substances as well.
Well, by definition, if you're selling these kind of things in an organized way, that would be considered organized crime. I'm not sure gangs are involved in the mushroom sales in the same way you might say gangs are involved in the fentanyl or cocaine market or things like that. But certainly there are risks. People also sometimes go and pick mushrooms themselves to access mushrooms, and that can be quite dangerous if you get the wrong kind and ingest the wrong kind. That can be fatal or quite injurious. And certainly there is a street trade in these things. At Get Your Drugs Tested, we do find not so much mushrooms, but we do find other psychedelics that are sometimes not what they are represented to be, or they're a different product. You know, for instance, it's not quite the same category, but we often find MDMA and MDA are sold as parallel substances, and people think they have the one, but they have the other, which isn't going to kill you, but is certainly not going to provide the therapeutic benefits you're looking for. But when it comes to these psychedelics, I wouldn't say it's gang sales specifically, but they are sold in an unregulated, uncontrolled way. There are great risks involved in taking substances and accessing substances like that, both risks to your health and risks to your safety in terms of trying to access things in a non-regulated kind of way or not on the street. And certainly our clients indicate to us they're very grateful to be able to access these things in a way where they know what they're getting. They know that we have done our best to ensure these products are safe and that they're getting what they paid for. And if there's a problem or a question, they know where to come back. We also provide a user guide for each of our substances as well. So if you access psilocybin mushrooms or LSD or DMT or something like that, we have a user guide which explains how to use the substance safely, responsibly, what the potential risks and benefits are, how to keep those risks low and maximize those benefits. So certainly none of those kind of options are available when you're buying these substances off the street or from any other place than from a retail store like ours.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of other questions. What do people come in and buy these substances for? Like, what kinds of health issues or spiritual or what other kinds of issues? Why are they using?
Well, it's definitely a wide range. A lot of people are using mushrooms and other psychedelics for issues like PTSD, depression, anxiety, drug addiction, and drug use issues. Others are simply seeking to go camping or have a pleasant time and use this as a substitute for alcohol or other substances. But there's definitely a lot of medical use like that, and some of them have got legal permission to access this and come in with their forms. That's a minority of people, but certainly it's a growing number as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you sell to children?
No, we have a strict age limit. Children are not allowed in our store at all. We have signs outside and inside that have that. And we also, anybody who wants to purchase any of these substances from us has to become a member. And that process is very simple. They're basically showing us their ID and signing a form which indicates that they're going to be a responsible user. They're going to keep these products out of the hands of children. They're not going to drive or swim or climb or do any kind of irresponsible behaviors, that they're aware of the risks and that they're going to be very responsible in their use. And that's just something we decided on ourselves was an appropriate measure to encourage people to use these things safely.
I'm out of time, but thank you.
Great, thanks, Councillor Carr. Seeing Councillor, no? Okay, I'm going to put myself on the queue. Great, okay. First question, and this could be for either of you. I'm just noticing actually as I'm reviewing this as we're talking, the discrepancy between the application for a business license and the actual business license. The application describes gifts and party supplies. The license that was issued by the City of Vancouver describes gifts and novelties. Can you explain how it went from party supplies to novelties?
I'm not really aware of how that works or what those things are. We felt that was the most appropriate category for the kind of products we wanted to sell, but I'm not sure why it got changed from party supplies to novelties or why that is or how that worked.
Okay, I mean, anecdotally, I've certainly referred to party supplies in a broader sense, not just balloons, but other things. And also recognizing that novelties sort of suggest, I think by definition, something new and unusual.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, and I realize I missed that opportunity to ask the chief license inspector how that might have come along. But in any event, shall remain a mystery.
These are novel items.
Certainly, I'm more curious how it went from party supplies to novelties and who made that decision that a party supply was a novelty. Obviously, we're not referring to balloons per se. Moving on, I'm looking at the material that was presented as part of the council report in April of 2015 around the medical marijuana retail usage. And one of the strategic analysis from the City of Vancouver suggested that medical marijuana is a substitute for more harmful drugs, for example, alcohol, tobacco, prescription opiates, and some illegal drugs such as heroin or cocaine, and also as a means to reduce the state of opioid overdose deaths and opioid-related morbidity, and 3, to relieve withdrawal symptoms during the detox and to increase retention rates during treatment. Is your assertion that psychedelics meet that same sort of criteria as was suggested in 2015 for marijuana?
Absolutely. There's a growing body of evidence, and certainly many of our members would speak to that they are using these substances, often only microdosing, which involves sub-threshold doses, where you're not actually having a psychedelic experience, but you're getting some psychological benefits. And that's quite common, and many of our members are using this to reduce or eliminate the use of substances. I've had people come in telling me about their use of methamphetamine having been stopped, or use of opiates having been stopped, and there's a growing body of evidence around that, I think, as well. But for a lot of people, their compulsive use of drugs might be related to psychological issues or treating themselves, and often psychedelics can provide that healing benefit that then eliminates the need of using a substance like that to deal with pain or anxiety or those kind of psychological issues.
So then, looking at this regulation for retail marijuana from 2015, if in theory we were to substitute marijuana for psychedelics and basically replicate the MMRU framework, including the license fees that were attached to that, would that be sort of what works within what you see as a...
That to me would be an ideal solution. I think it's a simple and elegant one, and I think it's representative of what's been happening politically and also scientifically in awareness of these substances, and it fits very well. And I think that would be an excellent solution, simply to add psychedelics into that 2015 bylaw.
So recognizing the relatively recent growth in the sale of mushrooms and psychedelics, not just retail storefronts, but also online, in September of 2019, the Vancouver City Council of the day rejected a member motion that was called Deterring and Preventing the Distribution and Sale of Psilocybin Mushrooms and Other Illicit or Controlled Drugs Unlawfully Sold in the City of Vancouver. Did your organization, as a business model, interpret that decision of council to mean something?
Yeah, I mean, that motion was brought in specifically because of comments that I'd made on social media about the intention to help open psilocybin mushroom dispensaries in Vancouver. And yeah, that bylaw was rejected by City Council. It was intended to proactively stop the opening of dispensaries. And certainly that, to me, was taken as a signal that the City Council of the day was not willing to do that, and was certainly at least somewhat supportive of the idea of these kind of businesses being able to operate and potentially get licensed in the future.
So euphemistically, that may have been considered a gray area.
I definitely see this as a gray area, one which we work to make as light a shade of gray as possible.
Great. And that is my time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, Mr. LeBlanc, do you have any questions for the witnesses?
Thank you. Yes, I do. Mr. Larson, I just want to get some clarification on your role with this particular business, the licensee 1394867 BC Ltd. You've introduced yourself today as a spokesperson for the business, but we've seen some tweets and we've seen some media coverage that seems to suggest you have a little bit more intimate knowledge and dealings with respect to the business activities at the location. Can you clarify that for us, please?
There's a nonprofit society of which I am a director, which is involved with these dispensaries, and I also act as the spokesperson, but I'm not the owner or the business license holder.
Okay, I'm just going to read from your tweet that indicates I'm just reading from the heading at the top of page 8. So happy to get this new location open, 247 West Broadway. Just had our first customer. What do you mean when you say just had our first customer?
Well, like I said, there's a nonprofit society of which I'm the director, and that is involved in the operation of that dispensary.
And how is that nonprofit society involved in the operation of that dispensary? Because we've seen the corporation documents indicating that there's a sole director. So please let us know how that nonprofit society is involved.
They have a relationship with the numbered company, which is holding the business license, but the nonprofit does the banking and the financial aspects of things.
Okay, and just reviewing the news article from CTV News, page 9, 10, 11. I read from a quote in the piece earlier, this is at the bottom of page 11, where you indicated to the reporter at CTV that we have a retail business license. To be honest, we didn't tell the licensing officials that we'd be selling psychedelics and mushrooms when we opened up. You don't take any issue with respect to the fact that you told the reporter that information?
I'm not the person who filed the business license, but no, I don't think that it was indicated psychedelics were on there, although I don't think that a lot of products were indicated on that license application.
You had knowledge, though, in terms of how the business activities at 247 West Broadway were being represented to the city in the business license application, correct?
Yes.
Yes, and you didn't advise the city, or you're not aware of the fact that the business, sorry, I'm just trying to phrase this in a way that reflects your involvement with the business. When the application was submitted, you were aware of the fact that there were no representations to the city that the business at 247 West Broadway would be selling psychedelics and mushrooms, fair to say?
Well, they never asked those kind of questions. But I will say that we're also affiliated with the Medicinal Mushroom Dispensary and Coca Leaf Cafe at 651 East Hastings, which was given a business license in 2020. And that license was renewed every year in 2021, 2022, and 2023, even though we were also very open with our signage and our storefront and on social media about our activities and sales there. I took that as a sign that the staff were willing to license these kind of locations.
You don't take issue with respect to the fact that the information in terms of the products that are being offered in your tweet on the placard on the door, mushrooms, LSD, DMT, coca leaf. You don't take issue with respect to the fact that those were all prohibited substances under the Federal Controlled Substances Act, do you?
No, but there are exemptions to those rules, including Section 56 exemptions, and some Canadians who do have permission to access those substances.
And when this particular business that's the subject of these proceedings, 247 West Broadway, opened in early 2022, you understood that there was a full intention to sell those products in contravention of that federal law. Is that fair to say?
Sure, yes.
Thank you. Those are my questions for the witness.
Great. Thank you.
I wonder, I'm so sorry, I do have a response that arose as a result of the line of questioning. I'm not sure if I'm entitled. It would take 30 seconds.
I'll allow it.
Perhaps it's something that can be addressed in your submissions, Mr. Lloyd?
Sure, no problem.
Okay,
That's fine.
perfect. Sure. Thank you. Thank you. I'm not a frequent chair of this particular role, so I appreciate the guidance. We're now going to hear closing submissions from the City of Vancouver's Council.
Thank you. Councillor Fry, you had some questions for Mr. Lloyd with respect to, and Ms. Hicks with respect to criminal convictions related to this matter, and some submissions that were made by Mr. Lloyd indicated that there was no finding of fact with respect to what transpired at this particular premises by way of a conviction through some type of court proceedings. I'm going to warn the panel about getting derailed on that particular issue. The Vancouver Charter is quite clear that the standard with respect to a suspension of a business license by the Chief License Inspector is gross misconduct. That terminology encompasses a variety of activities, and it's up to the Chief License Inspector, the authorities delegated to her through the Vancouver Charter, and through this panel on review to interpret the terminology gross misconduct and determine whether or not the evidence that was before the Chief License Inspector and is now before this panel amounts to gross misconduct. So in a broader sense, this panel is asked to engage in a statutory, an exercise of statutory interpretation. I'll just reiterate what I said at the outset. This is not a criminal proceeding. You do not need to hold the evidence to the criminal standard of beyond a reasonable doubt. That's not the purpose of this proceeding. The purpose of this proceeding is administrative in nature, and you need to determine whether or not the information that was available to the Chief License Inspector, supplied to her through her own research, supplied to her through media clippings, supplied to her through property use inspection, established that the discovery of the fact that the sale of prohibited substances were being carried out at this particular premises. That in contravention of federal laws, and that in contrast to the representations that the business was made with respect to its application for its business license. We heard from Mr. Larson that it appears as though from the get-go, the intention of the business was to always sell products in contravention of the federal law. That was the intention. There was no representation to the contrary. And I'll say that Mr. Larson boasted about that fact in his news article to CTV. We all know that there is advocacy taking place around these issues. There was around marijuana, and now that marijuana has more or less sorted itself out, the advocacy efforts have now moved on to other controlled substances, and we find ourselves in this particular. But as I said earlier, this is not an advocacy issue. This is not a criminal issue. This is an issue of whether or not there was gross misconduct in the carrying out of business at the location. And respectfully, I'm going to suggest that this panel ought to defer to the Chief License Inspector's interpretation of gross misconduct. And perhaps I'll just comment on what gross misconduct amounts to. The indication of the term gross misconduct indicates that there's a departure from what you would consider to be ordinary misconduct. And we've all seen business licenses. We know that certain restaurant establishments have hours of patio and hours of hour restrictions in terms of when music can be played and those types of things. Contraventions of license conditions may amount to, say, simpliciter misconduct. What I think that this court needs to understand is that there is a hierarchy of misconduct. And what we have in terms of the evidence that's before the panel today is that misconduct today amounts to gross misconduct for two sole reasons. Well, three. One is that we have non-compliance with the federal statute. Second is that there was a deliberate misrepresentation in terms of the business activities that were being carried out there. And we don't need proof beyond a reasonable doubt to know that that's what's going on. The third is that you need to consider the license bylaw itself. And I don't think that this has been mentioned. Page 27, 28 of the evidence material. Section 4 sub 12 at the very bottom of the page is a general condition that applies to all businesses in the city. Every license holder must comply with all federal and provincial laws. It's a mandatory requirement for all business owners. You do not need a conviction, a criminal conviction in a separate proceedings to establish that fact. You need to decide whether the evidence that was before the Chief License Inspector is sufficient to establish that and determine that gross misconduct was occurring at the premises. And respectfully, I think that that's been made out. A couple of other points. Mr. Lloyd indicated that we really don't have evidence in terms of what representations were made during the application process. And that the applicant could have spoken with somebody over the phone who may have represented that this particular activity was authorized. That's pure conjecture. and the onus would be on Mr. Lloyd and his clients to put some sort of indication that that may have been the case. But otherwise, he's drawing an inference of a possibility from no evidence whatsoever, and that's simply insufficient to raise any kind of possibility of the fact that that may have occurred. The other point that I want to make is this: is that the proposal now for a new business license involves a new term that many of us are only hearing for the first time: ethnogens. The thing about regulating this particular field of business, and anybody who was around during the time that the city tried to do this around medical marijuana, realizes that language is terribly important, and the extent to which ethnogens can be interpreted and what they mean, quite frankly, I don't know. And the thought that this panel can put some type of condition on the business license regulating ethnogens, I think would be a mistake. That's an issue that needs to be put before council with full report from the licensing office with respect to what that terminology may mean. Amendments need to be put into the bylaw in terms of defining what that term may mean. That's what happened with medical marijuana. And I don't think that this panel should mistakenly do an end run around the issue, fully going before council for a full airing in terms of discussions of policy and enactments by perhaps giving the impression that these types of businesses can be regulated simply by placing a condition in the business license or an ill-defined term that really nobody knows what it means. So respectfully, I'd suggest that the suspension ought to be upheld, and that the business license should not reissue with any kind of.
Okay. We will now hear the licensee reply and closing submissions. The licensee council will now have the opportunity to reply to the City of Vancouver's council, followed by their closing submissions.
Thank you so much. My reply is relatively brief, and my closing submissions will also be relatively brief. I will urge caution around the use of gross misconduct. My friend says language is important. Language is important. Our chief license inspector was unable to provide us any information about any other finding of gross misconduct. No term of definitions, no scope of what that could constitute. And unfettered discretion of that nature without any parameters, that can't be what the bylaw is allowing for. I would say that my friend's submission that I'm proffering conjecture regarding whether or not my client tried to get the correct license for what he was doing. Councillor Fry clearly identified that there's actually evidence on the face of the license itself that they might have had a frank discussion with someone in that information office, and that's why we see party supplies versus novelties. I think the evidence is on its face. My reply is brief. In 2020, there was a psychotherapist on Vancouver Island that wanted, he specializes in treating terminal cancer patients with treatment-resistant depression. And he wanted a Section 56 exemption to provide psilocybin, because there's really great research coming out of UBC and Johns Hopkins in the States that psilocybin can help people dealing with depression that cannot be dealt with any other drug. I did his Section 56 application, submitted it to Health Canada, and was rejected. Health Canada said, we're rejecting him, but if you apply for his cancer patients, why don't you do that? The suggestion being they would grant them. So I applied for the cancer patients and promptly received these exemptions for a significant number of people. And Councillor Carr, yeah, you asked Mr. Larson if it could be dangerous for someone that's seeking to access it if they don't have a clean, well-lit space that functions according to rules to access it, and it can be. And I saw it with some poor terminal cancer patient that receives an exemption from the federal government saying, yes, you can access this substance, but you have to buy it off of the street. And that is just foundationally problematic. I would say that that a license of this nature, a clean, well-lit space for someone that needs this substance to access it, does make sense. It could not possibly be gross misconduct. Those are my submissions.
Great. Okay, thank you. At this point, the business license hearing panel will enter discussion. Please add yourself to the queue if you wish to make comments. Councillor Klassen.
Thank you. Thank you to the staff and the applicant for their presentations. This is a pretty straightforward matter for me. We're not. I mean, although council has within its discretion to weigh into advocating on federal laws and other matters, this is not the business of this meeting. This is about whether to uphold the requirements of our business license process and whether the evidence here represents moving beyond the terms set out. And what I have seen here is not only evidence to show that the business license was not, there was non-compliance to the terms of the business license, but there had been misrepresentation on the party of who had the business license. And that is sort of the straight, sort of clear takeaway for me within the evidence that's been presented. I acknowledge that there may be a lot of evolving understanding about psychedelics and other drugs, but as City's Council has just suggested, it puts us in an incredibly risky position to be not only sort of straying outside the laws that are established federally about this, and also the recommendations of public health here in British Columbia. It really puts us in a position of potentially allowing things that could bring harm to people. And that's why we have ways of regulating it's sometimes updating and amending our approach and our views and our laws about this. But this is not the purpose of this business hearing. The business hearing is here to listen to the evidence put forward, to see whether the business license terms have been adhered to. They haven't. The evidence shows that, and it also shows that there had been sort of continuous misrepresentation as to what the business license holder was doing. And so, therefore, I would be proposing to move that the panel uphold the decision of the chief license inspector to suspend the business license. Thank you.
Great. So sorry, Councillor, were you
I
moving a motion?
I have moved that we would, so I'll be looking for a seconder on this.
Not seeing a seconder for that. Okay. Next on the queue, Councillor Carr.
Yeah, thank you. I will be prepared to offer comments, but I'm wondering if I could, because it might be important to get the accurate legal language, if I can ask you to do a short recess while I speak with the city's council regarding language for the motion, an appropriate language,
I'm going to suggest then that we take a 5-minute recess. Is that appropriate?
maybe 10?
10-minute recess? Okay. If, with everybody's indulgence, we'll take a 10-minute recess to allow Councillor Carr a conversation on legal. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to.
I think it would be fair for Mr. Lloyd.
I'm just sending it right now to council meeting amendments. I don't, just not move it, and then there's discussion. I mean, we sort of had to move us to.
All right, I think that may be 10 minutes-ish. Everybody here and ready? All right, Councilor Carr, you had the floor, and you still have 4 minutes left. Wait, 1 second. There you go. Mic's on.
Okay, I will, I have sent a motion to the clerks. I just want to make sure it's being received. Okay, so I think that rather than just speak generally and then deal with the motion, I'll just table the motion, Chair. I think everyone can see that, yes, it's up, great. That my motion is to overturn the decision of the chief license inspector and that a business license be reissued to the applicant with terms that clarify the business as education and advocacy. And I was unclear whether that, we might want to get some legal comment, whether it's advocacy or education, but regarding entheogens and medical psychedelic, psychoactive substances. And I've the list there that I think we've all heard about. I'm going to speak to this because I really feel there's several things at play here. One is whether or not there is actually a reason to believe that there was misrepresentation or gross misconduct on the part of the business license holder. I'm not convinced that there was gross misconduct. I feel that there was an attempt to try and find a category and a list of categories that had a variety of names for business licenses, and party supplies sort of fit the best. I'm not privy to the discussions that occurred regarding the choice of that with our own business license department members. And there didn't seem to be able to be provision of any evidence on the part of the city that clarified that process for me. So, it's, in my mind, it's not guilty until proven innocent. It's innocent until proven guilty, and I do not have a sense of proof in that regard. The second key point I want to make is around how change happens politically, legally, and often it is because there are decisions made. In the case of the City of Vancouver, a decision we made, for example, in 2015 to actually allow legally the sale of cannabis within this city when it was still illegal federally until 2021. So we're talking 6 years prior. And I believe that our ability to be proactive, thoughtful, brave, made a big difference, and obviously ultimately resulted in the legalization of the sale of cannabis. So is it a case where we could pursue that? Yes, but we can't do it in this form, in the form of a business license hearing. That would take being able to put that issue to council and seeing if council as a whole wants to be as brave as the Vision Council was in 2015 to move that forward. Regarding the psychedelics themselves and the psychoactive substances, psilocybin, mushrooms, coca, peyote, DMT, etc. I just want to put on the record that there is a long, long history of use of these amongst traditional peoples, indigenous peoples, and use in for spiritual reasons, for religious reasons. It's worldwide, and so, do they cause harm? I would say no. That the history and use has been very well verified. That they. Am I out of time?
Oh, my apologies. Sorry, I didn't even see that.
Okay. Well, they don't cause harm.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Klassen. Okay, I will second this recommendation and just add a few of my own comments. And I first want to express my appreciation for the Chief License Officer and the diligence with which they perform their job and their entire team, and to Mr. LeBlanc for representing. I do reject the grounds of gross misconduct for a number of reasons. First and foremost, I do see there's some obvious confusion between the application, which was for party supplies, and the definition that the city assigned the business license, which was for novelties, which suggests to me that there was some kind of conversation that might have added some clarity or distinction to that license that hasn't been captured here. I also reject gross misconduct on the pretty clear gray area that's been established, not only through the decriminalization movement by the province of British Columbia, but through the rejection of the 2019 council member motion to prohibit mushroom sales and to crack down on that. The council of the day did certainly send a signal that this was a gray area. And of course, recognizing the trends that we see an incredible rise in interest in psychedelic therapy and medicines, everyone from Gwyneth Paltrow and Goop to online resources. It's mushrooms are literally exploding everywhere, and we see that as a cultural trend. And then thirdly, it becomes a philosophical and ethical conversation around even the idea of first do no harm. Recognizing that there is this interest in mushrooms, recognizing that when we rejected the mushroom prohibition motion in 2019, it was in part in response to the alarming increase in overdose deaths in Vancouver, and that mushrooms were being introduced as an alternate therapy to mitigate that harm. And in fact, as part of a comprehensive harm reduction program where this particular organization is also providing free drug testing, we've only seen the overdoses increase since that time. And as unfortunate as it is that we have to be the kind of the line that really sort of recognizes that maybe we do have to have a more comprehensive conversation. And I hope that this decision, should it be upheld, or sorry, rejected, this business license, you know what I'm saying? If Councillor Carr's motion is received and approved, I think it should also serve a catalyst for us to introduce a new licensing framework similar to the medical marijuana framework that we, City of Vancouver, pioneered in 2015 in direct response to the overdose crisis, in direct response to recognizing that people are indeed purchasing these substances. And if we want folks to be safe, we don't need them going on to the unaccountable black market, buying substances in back alleys, rather from a location that is accountable to the public, that provides waiver forms to its clients, that enforces a strict age limit on who can purchase. And I think those are not necessarily indicative of gross misconduct. I think it's responsible conduct. I do appreciate that in the context of the charter, it might be interpreted as gross misconduct, but for the reasons I outlined, I'm going to reject it as gross misconduct. And I say that with the utmost respect to the chief license inspector, because I do recognize this is a very complicated file, but there is also a great deal of harm that could come through cavalier dismissal of this as a legitimate harm reduction approach to divert folks from more harmful substances. Okay, Councillor Klassen.
Thank you, Chair. With my 90 seconds left, I'll just try and reiterate. First, the gray area of the motion you described that came in, I believe, 2019. I did follow the loop on that one. It eventually was revised to a motion upholding some of the 4 pillar principles that was supported unanimously by Council. I was not in Council at that time, and also as I become more accustomed to the business license hearing process, I understand that the role of the business license hearing is not an advocacy role, but to uphold or decide the legitimacy of our business license process. And I think this has been a clear case of being put forward by our city staff and our legal counsel. I will not be supporting this motion. And I do worry that this will be considered to be an affront to all the legitimate license holders who have abided our rules around the city. And just taking a quick look at the definition of entheogens or psychoactive substances that induce alterations in perception, mood, consciousness, cognition, or behavior for the purposes of engendering spiritual development and so on. I do not feel that I am qualified by any term, under any circumstances, to be able to rule on whether those are the types of things that should be put out into the marketplace in a decision in this chamber. Thanks very much.
Okay. Sorry, let me just refer to my script here. I think it's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Yeah, I guess we can vote verbally. Or clerks, do we need to do it on the queue? Or on the panel? Okay. So we'll just vote on the voting panel. And for Councillor Carr's motion. And that passes with Councillor Klassen in opposition. Do I need to read that out? Sorry, let me just pull that up so I can read it out for the record. The motion to overturn the decision of the chief license inspector and that a business license be reissued to the applicant with terms that clarify the business's education and advocacy regarding entheogens and medicinal psychoactive substances such as psilocybin mushrooms, peyote, LSD, and DMT passes. With Councillor Klassen opposed. At that, would somebody like to move a motion to adjourn? Moved and seconded by Councillors Klassen and Carr. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, this motion carries and this hearing is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.